Here's some reading practice. I got this PDF from a website called houroftheTime.com. Um, I'm not sure exactly what this is. Anyway, I'm just going to start reading for practice. So it begins 2 January 1970, estimated date. Blah 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 historical review program releases sanitized 2003. Okay, so that's just some stuff, classifications, I guess. Photostat, whatever that is. So I'm just going to skip this bullshit here. And the title of this journal, I guess, or whatever, is called Power Moves Involved in the Overthrow of an Unfriendly Government. So let's just get past all this crap. So there's a disclaimer here. It says the following hypothetical case history describing the power plays or pressures required to overthrow an unfriendly government should not be construed as related to any particular country or set of actual circumstances. It is intended only as an example of how various operational techniques may be employed in a closely integrated, concerted manner to achieve a definite objective, as well as some of the adversities which might be expected to develop during the conduct of an operation. Table of contents. Okay. Power moves involved in the overthrow of an unfriendly government. The target. An unfriendly government is controlled covertly by the communists and represents a threat to the security and welfare of the U.S. government. Description of the target. Population about 3,500,000. Some 2 million are peasants or otherwise non-politically conscious. About 1 million are politically conscious but apathetic towards change. 200,000 are roughly in active support of the communist-controlled government. About 300,000 are passively in opposition. And only about 5,000 are willing to do something about a change. Armed forces. After some 10 years of communist penetration and influence, the armed forces have been effectively neutralized as an opposition factor. The president of the country is a strong-willed leader who is capable of exercising personal control over the armed forces and is in complete sympathy with the communist apparatus which controls the country. The armed forces consist of a small semi-mechanized army of 7,000, poorly equipped and trained. The U.S. Army has provided a training mission in the country for the past 5 years. The Territorial Guard system exists for mobilizing National Guard type units in an emergency. There is no Navy of consequence. The Air Force has a distant pro-American attitude. Its numbers about 700 men and 36 aircraft. The estimated mobilization strength at D plus 10 is 10,000 men. Security. The communist-controlled police force and special intelligence services are superior to any other in the entire region. They have demonstrated their effectiveness in the past by exposing and subduing over 30 attempted coups against the government. At the start of this operation, they have developed security measures slightly short of denied area conditions, which permit freedom of speech and movement. But under surveillance, the National Police Force, numbering about 3,000 men, has been favored over the armed forces in receiving arms and equipment. Paramilitary. The oldest and most effective concentrated effort of the communists has been in the labor force, where they have maintained control for almost 10 years. Using unionism as a cover, there is evidence that the communists have attempted to organize and train elements in partisan type warfare. Recent intelligence reveals many armed caches throughout the country and supports an estimated strength of about 20,000 armed and trained partisans. Economic. The country is primarily agricultural, with one basic commodity and one secondary commodity, which together form the basic economic structure. Excuse me. Both commodities are marketed almost exclusively in the United States. Almost all manufactured products are imported from the United States. Thus, the economy of this country is completely tied to the United States. The communist government in recent years has exploited this situation fully and succeeded in expropriating large tracts of American-owned agricultural property. The obvious intention is to neutralize all means of production and reorient the country's economy to Europe, possibly to the Eastern Europe. Subversive. The International Communist Party has developed a base of operations of serious proportions in the target country. From this sanctuary, the communists have been able to direct subversive operations in neighboring countries, as well as in all other countries of the community of nations to which it belongs. There exists a real danger that, if not checked in the immediate future, the communists will be able to subvert neighboring countries, thus forming a new communist bloc, which would be a threat to the safety and welfare of the United States. Inscription of friendly assets before operations. General. The 2 million non-political elements of the population, although subject to constant communist pressure, is a neutral segment of the population. The 300,000 individuals believed to be passively opposed to the target regime are the greatest latent force for the stimulation of passive resistance and later active opposition to the communists. This segment of the society, once stimulated, could be expected to influence the second largest segment of roughly 1 million politically conscious but apathetic individuals. The core of about 5,000 who are believed to be willing to take active part against the communists is the greatest potential catalyst, notwithstanding its present organization and lack of leadership. Geographically, the bulk of anti-communists are located in the capital city, in the principal port, and in the rural provinces northwest of the capital. Intelligence. There are no high-level penetrations or formal intelligence assets in existence. The station has a small number of witting informants and numerous contacts in the anti-communist elements which have not been exploited thus far. The principal agent in exile and his second or deputy PA claim numerous contacts and agents, but these have not been exploited or formalized to date. Thus, at the outset, there is a serious dearth of intelligence assets. Psy-war. Within the target city, there is a small group of anti-communist students who have been carrying out certain Psy-war activities and, although responsive to station influence, thus far remain outside the latter's control and do not constitute a formal asset. They number about 150 and have excellent contact with all identifiable anti-communist elements in the target country. They publish an anti-communist weekly tabloid and conduct periodic radio programs. This group is completely overt and not fully identified to date. Loosely affiliated with their group are student groups in exile in two bordering countries which conduct similar anti-communist propaganda directed at the target regime. The press in general and several radio stations at the moment completely independent. These organs are extremely cautious in editorial content in order to avoid government restrictions, but in general follow a clearly anti-communist policy line. Paramilitary. At the onset of this program, there are no clearly defined paramilitary assets within the target area. There are about 300 aggressive individuals in exile in neighboring countries who have not been clearly identified to date, but who may be considered as potential paramilitary assets and would respond to the leadership of the deputy PA. These men represent a cross-section of outcasts, some political, some criminal, and some ideological. Many of these exiles have been involved in previous attempts to overthrow the communist regime. In general, their morale is low and their degree of preparation practically zero. Nonetheless, this group is an excellent potential paramilitary factor. Analysis. General. From the foregoing, certain essential factors appear evident, namely, the numerical advantage, population-wise, is on the friendly side. The organizational and disciplinary aspect are unquestionably on the side of the target or the enemy to be. The economic controls are within the grasp of friendly forces. The armed strength is predominantly in favor of the enemy. The press is generally the press in general is independent, thus favorably inclined towards anti-communism. Operational assets. Although there are advantages and disadvantages present in major proportions, the most serious deficiency is in the almost complete absence of real, tangible, controlled operational assets upon which to base a sound operational program. Thus, all assets must be regarded as potential and subject to assessments only after a period of development. Target vulnerabilities. The communist minority is a predominantly Catholic country. The communist minority in a predominantly Catholic country is maintained in power only through its penetration of the sources of power in the government and not by popular acclaim. The keystone of this power is believed to be the president, who alone controls the army. The second vulnerable point is the economic dependence on the United States as a market for its produce and a source for finished products. Conclusion. Although the target is vulnerable to popular opposition and the communist control of the sources of power, is chiefly manifest in its control over the president. The numerically larger anti-communist element is thoroughly disunited and lacking in cohesion. Also, all operational assets are only potential and do not exist as tangible, controlled operational assets. The economic control over the country rests within friendly hands due to the numerous attempts against the target regime and the open denunciation of its communist character. The element of surprise is practically non existent from the beginning of this operation. Strategy. Discussion. The principal advantage in friendly hands is economic control. However, to reduce the government to such serious economic straits as to force its capitulation would require actions which would be identified as strictly American economic interference in the affairs of a smaller nation. Hence, thoroughly reprehensible as related to the foreign relations of the United States in this area. The same reason which precludes economic strangulation applies to direct or overt military action or pressure. Although direct military action would not need to be on a large scale, any application of this force or threat to do so would only incur the severest antagonism of all friendly small nations and expose our government to propaganda attacks of the Kremlin. Such unilateral or multilateral use of force is therefore discarded. The elimination of the two most positive means of removing the communists from this target country leave only covert and clandestine procedures for consideration and imposes the condition of plausible denial. Strategy. The application of covert clandestine procedures requires the basic recognition that the enemy possesses predominant strength in organized, disciplined numbers and arms, plus the advantage of governmental powers. To offset these formidable real advantages enjoyed by the target, it is necessary that a program be developed which would encompass a series of pressures or power plays on the ever increasing plane of intensity, which somewhere along the way should provide the appropriate combination of factors to dispose of the incumbent president, and suffice to exploit this situation by expelling the communists while being prepared to consolidate all gains as rapidly as possible. These power maneuvers should permit the exercise of ranging from a fool's mate to a scholar's mate, to the most difficult and end pressures possible or necessary to satisfactorily conclude the operation. The program should envision the easiest to the hardest means, the shortest length of time to the longest time necessary, and above all, it should be designed to achieve ultimate success once committed. In essence, the strategy for this operation should be based upon the imponderable factor of uncertainty as to how much effort or what particular technique or combination of techniques would be required to achieve the objective. Therefore, to avoid a piecemeal trial and error approach, a program of action should be adopted which would concentrate the entire gamut of maneuvers in the shortest possible period in order to derive the maximum pragmatic effect of each maneuver upon the next, thus developing a sustaining tension until further resistance to the pressure becomes intolerable and the enemy succumbs to the anti-communist forces thus created. The overthrow must be complete and thorough in order to remove all dangers of an early counterattack which would undo the efforts and possibly result in an even more severe and serious situation that originally existed. Complete success must be ensured. Operational planning, the program, general. Having established the basic strategy for the operation, it becomes immediately apparent that the technique and procedures employed to fulfill this concept of conduct must be equally unorthodox. If pressure is to be developed and sustained against the target in order to create tension, then it also follows that the operation must be pursued on a top operational priority basis throughout. The preponderant strength and advantages of the target, both physical and disciplinary, are so formidable that only through the employment of the highest form of covert clandestine techniques in the maximum degree of integration will it become possible to realize the technical or professional superiority required to overcome the target. Thus, in essence, the weapon to be used must be a psychological one. The intelligence collection must contribute to the psychological analysis of the target. The propaganda employed must contribute to the audio and visual stimulation of the audience at which it is directed. The employment of paramilitary factors or forces must constitute the psychophysic element of creating physical conditions as required in order to stimulate the desired psychological reaction of the target audience or individuals. All efforts towards defection of key target individuals must be consistent with the foregoing factors in order to culminate in action at the apex of psychological timing. Timing at the outset of the operation of this nature, with nothing but political assets on hand, and no certainty as to exactly how much effort may be required. It would be unrealistic to establish a rigid performance schedule in terms of deadlines. Nonetheless, it is important to have certain factors present and in line as the program develops, or else suffer the consequences of having one aspect ready and others far from being developed at the time required. Also, it is important to recognize that the premature development of certain factors might prejudice the timing of the operations, thereby losing their effectiveness. Upon consideration of the psychological temperament of the people in this hypothetical situation, it will be assumed, as in most nationalities, that they are capable of being highly aroused under proper stimulation, but are not capable of sustaining this state of mind for any extended period of time. This assumption, when weighed against the strategical concept for the conduct of this operation, logically dictates the restrictions that the anti-communist population should not be aroused prematurely, and that the tension not be extended too long. This timing factor, added to the predictable time required to develop specific assets under normal conditions, permits the reasonable conclusion that the operation could be launched and brought to a state of readiness within about 6 months. However, in order to retain maximum flexibility to adjust to events and unforeseen circumstances, it is considered more elastic if the 6 months period is not written into a tight schedule, but rather that the period be divided into stages of development without regard to the exact time required to achieve the objectives of each stage. In this manner, by setting limited objectives by stages, it is possible to ensure the orderly development of the program and guard against premature or abortive action. Stages of development. Stage 1. Objectives. A. Determine staff requirements, procuring and assigning personnel to specific tasks. B. Conduct field and headquarter assessments of friendly assets. C. Conduct field and headquarters assessments of enemy capabilities. D. Determine communications requirements. E. Prepare detailed operations for Stage 2. Stage 2. Objectives. D question mark. A. Establish field installations. B. Initiate preliminary psychological conditioning of target. C. Develop tactical and psychological intelligence collection system. D. Initiate defection activities. E. Commence monitoring target military camo conduits. Camo conduits. F. Initiate formalization of the training of paramilitary forces. G. Commence implementation of communications plans. H. Establish control over friendly propaganda assets propagating themes to discredit the target regime and encourage patience and hope among anti-communists. I. Initiate action towards establishment of a clandestine radio. J. Develop psychological pressures in border countries against target regime. K. Prepare logistical and air support plans. L. Prepare detailed operation plans for Stage 3. Stage 3. Objectives. About D-75. A. Complete paramilitary cadre training and commence expansion into teams. B. Establish clandestine radio facilities and prepare programming. C. Exploit friendly propaganda media to develop antagonism against the target regime. Fan passive will to resist. D. Employ psychological economic pressure. Develop internal economic pressures. E. Stimulate international opinion among Western nations against target regime. Accentuate psychological pressures from border countries. F. Develop distribution and organizational procedures within friendly pay war media. G. Develop and propagate a political philosophy for the anti communists, something to be for. H. Implement a psychological action in a third country, placing blame on target regime diversion. I. Confine defection prospects to most likely key individuals and concentrate upon their defection in place. J. Implement preliminary phase of logistical air support plans. K. Continue communications against RO training. Continue communications agent RO training. L. Prepare detailed operational plans for Stage 4. Stage 4 objectives about D-26. A. Develop partisan organizers and sabotage teams. B. Organize shock teams and special squads. C. Assign agents, ROs, to units and establish COMO plans and systems. D. Activate arms infiltration plan. E. Develop fighter bomber contingency capability. F. Activate clandestine radio program. G. Prepare radio intrusion deception plans against target military communications system. H. Exploit war media to accentuate divisionist activity, stimulate fear, rumors, develop symbol of resistance, invoke religious disapproval of communist regime, incite passive resistance. I. Execute an extensive pre-planned character assassination plot against key persons in target regime. Oh wow. J. Implement pre-arranged regional international conference to condemn communist domination of target country. K. Prepare advanced depots for air support in final phase. L. Finalize defection commitments and attempt a bloodless coup d'etat. M. Prepare plans for provisional governments to replace target regime. N. Prepare final plans in detail for an all-out showdown of strength and determination. 5. Stage 5. Excuse me. Stage 5 objectives. D-Day or V-Day. A. Assume target has not capitulated and force is required. Then the prepared sabotage plan would be implemented. Special squads would carry out elimination of key target personnel assignments. B. Simultaneously with the above, air supply drops would be completed to partisan teams not otherwise supplied. C. Upon completion of initial air supplies to partisans, the shock teams would be in place on respective targets and initiate attack plans. D. Clandestine radio would cover the above physical acts by initiating its prepared national broadcast, denoting great strength and reporting enemy defections, and etc. E. The planned elimination of target communication systems of landlines by the sabotaging teams should force reliance on the military radio system, which would then result in the activation of the intrusion deception radio unit in anticipation of destroying or deceiving this military system. F. The Psy-War media would implement its tactical Psy-War teams and carry out assigned tasks. Own assigned tasks. Carry out assigned tasks. G. Intelligence collection efforts would be concentrated on tactical and psychological intelligence. H. Defection plan for forcing an internal coup d'etat would be pressured with greatest efforts, aided by all the internal and external pressures set in motion at this time. I. Air striking power would be readied for deployment against tactical and strategical targets of greatest psychophysic impact. J. External international propaganda in friendly Western nations would be accentuated in favor of anti-communist forces. K. A ceasefire ultimatum would be in readiness for broadcast at the appropriate psychological moment, coincident with the internal coup d'etat by defection elements. L. The provisional government plan would be held in readiness for immediate implementation. M. Above forces and pressures would be steadily increased until the target regime is forced to collapse internally and the anti-communist forces are able to seize the power of the government. Stage 6. Objective V+1. A. Implement provisional government plan seizing all authority and controls. B. Implement immediate roundup of all dangerous communists and collaborators, instituting strict security measures throughout. C. Grant amnesty to all political prisoners held by the communist regime. D. Proclaim restoration of rights and freedoms of the individual and the institution of full democratic principles of government at the earliest possible moment. E. Collect documentary evidence for the communist control over a former regime. F. Initiate proceedings to install long-range high-level intelligence and Psy-War assets in the new government with the objective of preventing a return of the communist control or penetration of the new government or a possible counterattack. G. Terminate special operations. Excuse me. Organization of operations. Staff headquarters. Having established a strategic concept for guidance of the operation and formulated a program interpreting the concept in terms of specific courses of actions, it is essential to design the staff organization in such a manner as to provide the best support possible with the minimum number of individuals and the most effective means of control and direction. Accordingly, it is manifest that the operation should be controlled outside the station of the target country and that all stations would have any major part in the support of the operation in neighboring or nearby countries should be organized as a regional command to ensure maximum priority and coordination. The efforts for the duration of the special operation thus In essence, a special task force approach is considered necessary and desirable. The headquarters of the Special Task Force should be located in the most convenient place outside of the agency, under a cover, but within the continental limits of the United States, as this field headquarters would direct the regional command of field stations concerned in the operation. Excuse me. Its cover should permit its proper function in this regard, and its location would provide the best possible means of communication and travel with respect to the regional command. The composition of the staff headquarters should be as follows: Chief of Project, Chief of Operations, War Section, Paramilitary Section, Intelligence Section, Air Section, Operational Research Section, Security Section, Support Section, including Personnel, Finance, Logistics, and Administration, Communications Sections. Field Operations. All field stations assigned to the regional command would constitute component elements and be responsible for the conduct of operations specifically assigned to the respective stations, owing to the third country concept involved, in which operations are developed or based in other countries for employment in or at a given target country. There would be a certain special operations which would be directed exclusively by the task force headquarters outside the control of the local stations. The entire regional command would thus constitute an operational area subdivided by the areas of responsibility of the respective field stations, within which special independent operations of an intra-country nature might be co-headquarters located outside the region concerned. This system permits tight compartmentation within and among operations and a high degree of direct control by the responsible staff headquarters. Cover organization. It was assumed above that previous operation efforts had developed a PA among the exiles, who in turn had a deputy PA of some structure among the paramilitary exiles. This is a reasonable assumption, but is not present at the outset of the operation. It is certainly reasonable to assume that such persons could be found and developed to PA status. Therefore, a cover organization would be devised which would permit covert sponsorship of their cause, thereby enabling development of the mechanics and assets required to launch the operation. In this instance, it is assumed that the PA is satisfied with a simple explanation that a large group of American businessmen engaged in combating communism wherever possible, and who desire anonymity, have taken a great interest in the target country and are willing to provide a technical and financial help necessary to overthrow the target regime. This group, hereinafter referred to only as group, has professional, personal, and resources at its disposal to support the PA and his deputy without any strings attached. A compatible partnership might be developed wherein the PA and the deputy would provide the indigenous requirements of such an undertaking. It is further assumed that the above cover story is adopted and a partnership is thus formed. For the sake of terminology, this partnership shall be called the Council, and the PA and his deputy shall be called the Exile Committee as the counterpart to the group. With this beginning, an entire dual structure might be formed, with the case officers being assigned to specific tasks involving the Exile Committee as advisors, technicians or instructors all allegedly employed by the group and using pseudonyms. The Council provides the meeting ground for broad plans and decisions and permits the staff to exercise its influence under the guise of the group. In this manner, plausible deniability becomes possible and no interference of official connections should be permitted to seep into the relationship. It is important to spell out a definite state of principles and negotiate terms of agreement with the Exile Committee before actually commencing field operations. Further, it is important that the Exile Committee be kept compartmented for all operations not involving its personnel, that the committee agrees to the exercise strict compartmentation within and among its own operations. Independent operations. To avoid reliance on the basket containing all the eggs and to achieve maximum compartmentation of operations, it is desirable to develop unilaterally as many separate mechanisms or assets as possible through the field stations. This is particularly desirable in the case of defection operations. Therefore, all potential assets which have not been identified as involved or controlled by the Exile Committee should constitute independent operations. Establishment of operations. Having carefully noted the established strategic concept and the proposed program providing the course of action contemplated for this operation by projecting same against diagrammatic outline of the organizations, regional command, main headquarters, task force, country A, country B, country C, target country, information channels, another diagram, task force headquarters, Exile Committee, group, council, American, station A, B, C, station target, the cutouts, the PAs, indigenous exiles in A, B, C, target assets, task force 1, case officer, PA task 1, etc., etc. This assignment of potential friendly assets is possible to include what mechanisms or assets are required and from what indigenous sources these assets might be expected to be developed. This indigenous resource would undoubtedly include both those affiliated in this manner with the Exile Committee and those previously developed by the field stations. In any event, it would be possible to define each mechanism in terms of a particular PA, purpose, objective, requirements, estimated cost, responsible staff officer, the American cutout, or any desired mechanism which does not have a readily identifiable potential indigenous personnel available at the moment. It should be established as a requirement to be met. Each mechanism should be identified in the foregoing manner, classified as a task, and given a serial designation for reference purposes, i.e. T1, T2, and etc. If certain assets are already established as approved projects and are required to support this special operation, the task force headquarters should have authority to redefine such assets or projects in terms of specific tasks as above. So below. This system provides an easy method of clearly defining all mechanisms or functions required to support the operation, as well as providing means of budget forecasting, dispersing, and accounting for funds. Compartmentation, definition of responsibility and exercise of control, and other advantages. The following may provide examples of some specific tasks which would be required to support this operation. T1. Develop internal psychological intelligence collection net. T2. Develop external tactical intelligence net into target country. T3. Establish paramilitary field headquarters in country A. T4. Establish covert paramilitary cadre training school in country B. Excuse me. T5. Establish covert agent RO training school in country B. T6. Develop Psy-War teams in target country. T7. Develop external Psy-War teams in country A directed at target country. Also separate tasks for country C. T8. Develop clandestine radio team for country B, and separate tasks for teams using covert facilities in countries A, B, and C. T9. Develop clandestine radio facilities in country B and a separate task for an emergency facility at location X. T10. Develop radio monitoring team for intrusion deception of target military channels, country B. T11. Develop plans for convoking an international anti-communist conference in a nearby country outside a regional command. T12. Develop fighter bomber contingency capabilities for basing in country B. T13. Develop independent defection plan for target country. T14. Develop an indigenous creative writing staff for production of propaganda material. Tactical planning. General tactics. I'm going to stop at tactical planning, which is PDF 20, and I'll continue some other time.